think one of the sad things, I think a natural way to connect with your audience is through comedy. And there's so many, the comedic tradition in certain countries, the States, England has a very strong comedy tradition. Many of the European countries do as well. It's very kind of local. And what has happened in Canada is that we've created this extraordinary generation of Canadian comedic talent who are not here. They've actually haven't stayed. They've gone elsewhere. And I think that brain drain was significant, because I think that if they had stayed and been allowed to make their work here for television, for film, they would have naturally connected with the Canadian audience. I mean, the ones that went south of the border, like Ivan Reitman is, just the primary example, absolutely connected in a major way with a mass audience. That does speak back to, common language and perhaps, shared cultural assumptions in many respects, although we are a very different country. But that drain of comedic talent who I think would have naturally connected with a mass audience has just gone elsewhere.
That's a really good point. I mean, can you imagine if the Monty Python team had all gone off to Hollywood to make films as soon as they had the chance? I mean, all of those films would have had a totally different sensibility, and that's essentially what happens to our best Canadian comic talent. And going back to Ivan Reitman back in that generation, and Seth Rogen today, I mean, if the chance is there, people will go south.
And you think that'll always be the systemic flow, or?
Hollywood is pretty hard to resist that lure, because you've got the opportunity to do certain kinds of things and to work with certain kinds of people. I mean, it's an industry. I think Canadian film is a cottage industry. We don't have a film industry here per se. It's a cottage industry, and that's the same in many other countries in the world. It's not just Canada. And I think if you have aspirations to work in the mainstream, to reach a mass audience, to work with a large group of people who are doing the same thing as you are, you naturally are attracted to centers. I mean, that's the history of every art form, not just cinema. There was a period in time when Paris was the center of the world, and all the American writers went to Paris in the interwar period. They were all working there. James Joyce, well, not American, but Joyce was there, and Hemingway was there, and so there's those moments that kind of move around. And Hollywood is, for film, as important as the most important place there is, I guess, for a certain kind of aspiration when it comes to making certain kinds of films. That'll always be the way. It's attracted. I mean, look who it's attracting now: major Asian talent, major European talent, Australia. It's a magnet, and that will absolutely continue.
In terms of that magnet and that cultural juggernaut that is American cinema, at TIFF, how do you balance working within that system and still being able to make sure that Canadian films don't end up in the shadows? Because if you look, I guess over the course of the last 10 years, TIFF's become a really important place to break American films, like American Beauty to Slumdog Millionaire a couple years ago. How do you maintain that balance, that it doesn't become, a festival that showcases these, fantastic American films and still provide a spotlight for Canadian films?
I think the position that Canadian film and filmmakers have within our festival has always been an organic thing that changes. I mean, Piers started a series called Perspective Canada back in the mid-'80s, and that was at a time really important to bring the key Canadian films together and provide a platform, a spotlight for them so that people could find them, because that was really something that was quite urgent to do at that time, just finding Canadian films and putting the audience, as Piers said, in contact with the films and the filmmakers. That's less the case now. We still need to do that with the filmmakers who are just starting out, which is why we have our Canada First program at the festival, which is designed for people who are making their first and second feature films, and again allowing press and audience and buyers internationally to find those films. But there are many Canadian filmmakers who no longer need that kind of very specific focus spotlight, because they are already international filmmakers. Adam McGowan's film Chloe played as a gala presentation at our festival at the same level as the films with George Clooney or Bill Murray or any other major American stars, because he's working at that level now.